The amphitheater of Rithan's Reach, capital of the Syndicate's tri-world empire, was built not for entertainment, but for domination. Its tiered obsidian seating circled a central execution dais, polished to a reflective sheen, so that even the condemned could see themselves in the moment of judgment. Today, 12 figures stood at its center, human and outnumbered, yet not bowed. Shackles clinked softly as they shifted, wrists chained to belts embedded with translation nodes. Their expressions, though grim, held a defiance that made the alien spectators hiss and whisper among themselves. High Warlord Grax of the Jern Dominion raised one segmented arm and let silence fall. His hide was armored like volcanic stone, eyes glistening like molten glass. "People of the Syndicate," he boomed, his voice processed through atmospheric filters that turned it into a subterranean growl. "We convene not for war, but for justice. These Earthborn invaders, these scouts, came cloaked in diplomacy. But their data harvesters, encrypted signal codes, and neural recorders betray them." There was no translator pause. His words had already been carved into the arena's air by galactic neural streams. The audience absorbed them in unison, each being understanding the same indictment in its native cognition. Captain Mara Liao, the ranking scout among the prisoners, did not look away. The corners of her mouth twitched, not a smile, but not fear either. Her eyes scanned the tiered seating, noting representatives from all corners of the Syndicate. Her mouth was dry, her limbs leaden from days in containment fields. But her mind, trained for layered diplomacy, remained sharp. They weren't on trial. Earth was. Grax stepped aside as a floating platform descended. At its center stood a being of light and lattice, Chancellor Isserin of the Telex Spires. Rumored to be partially post-biological, she moved with the elegance of someone who had forgotten death. "You speak of espionage, but offer no proof beyond interpretation of tools common in galactic exploration," she said. "Have we truly fallen to such theater?" A murmur followed. Grax's voice sliced through it. "We do not need proof of poison when the well has already claimed lives. The Terrans were found within restricted systems. One of them," he jabbed a claw at Mara, "was accessing our relay archives on planetary militarization." "We were mapping safe trade routes," Mara replied. Her voice, though hoarse, rang clear in the amplifier field. "And the data was public. Your systems don't use firewalls. They use arrogance." Gasps, translated in myriad forms, hisses, growls, color changes, rippled across the crowd. "That arrogance," Grax thundered, "is precisely what must be culled." The dais pulsed. From its outer ring, 12 restraint pylons rose, each humming with containment energy. The other 11 scouts flinched. Mara did not. They all knew the moment would come. What none of them had expected was the speed. No appeal. No deliberation. A show. The pylons extended thin tendrils toward each scout, wrapping limbs and torsos. Pain induction protocols activated. One of them, a younger recruit named Jonah Perez, screamed, not from the agony alone, but from the violation. These were execution rigs designed to unravel consciousness before body. The Syndicate believed in suffering. For deterrence. Mara's jaw clenched as her rig powered on, shooting data spikes into her nervous system. Her last coherent thought was not of vengeance or regret, but of her sister back on Earth. Training to be a medic. She would never know how her sister died. Not truly. Then came the light. 12 beams ignited, pure streams of anti-structure radiation that stripped matter at the atomic level. In seconds, the human forms dissolved, cleanly, efficiently, their outlines blinking into dust that shimmered briefly before the arena's absorbers consumed it. Silence. The crowd, trained not to cheer but to observe, watched the final spark flicker. Then, as one, they turned from the platform and began to leave. Justice, in their eyes, had been served. From a secure chamber high above, Warlord Urakel of the Mindrith Enclave leaned toward Grax. "That was poorly staged," he muttered, his voice more wind than substance. "You have made martyrs of them." Grax scoffed. "I've made an example." Humans have always taken examples as invitations. "We will not hear from them again," Grax replied, more to himself than to his peers. "They will recoil. They will fear us." On Earth, The broadcast arrived not as a warning, but a challenge. Every planetary defense node, orbital relay, and civilian feed flickered with the footage, intentionally leaked by the Syndicate, seeded into the data pathways with virulence only possible through governmental cooperation. The United Planetary Council chamber was in chaos. Screens displayed looping video of the scouts' deaths, cut with alien commentary dripping with contempt. Military leaders shouted over scientists. Diplomats pounded fists against the table. President Naledi Okoye stood in silence as her staff argued around her. Her face bore none of the rage or sorrow that burned in others. It was stillness, a center of gravity in a collapsing world. Only once the noise began to thin did she speak. They died for asking questions. Her voice was low, but the room fell into focus. We sent them with open hands. We gave the Syndicate every courtesy. And they murdered them for it. A junior advisor tried to speak, something about retaliatory strikes, orbital war games, but she silenced him with a look. They did not fear our weapons, she continued. They feared our curiosity, our need to understand. They feared what we might become if left unimpeded. General Tavi Singh, head of Earth's Orbital Command, stepped forward. Madam President, if we deploy the Artemis Array, we can neutralize 3 outposts within the Syndicate's border. Tactical parity could be achieved in less than 6 months. Okoye turned toward him, her expression unreadable. And what would we become in that time? He hesitated. Survivors. She closed her eyes. Across Earth's networks, the population split. Some demanded retribution. Others feared escalation. Religious leaders called for peace. Technocrats warned of a species-wide existential reckoning. A few called it inevitable. In the weeks that followed, Earth went dark, not in terms of power or connectivity, but visibility. No signals left Sol system. No diplomats replied to outgoing messages. Terraforming missions were recalled. Scout ships vanished from known charts. To the galaxy, Earth had disappeared. Years passed. In Syndicate space, the memory of the execution faded. The seats once occupied by humans at interstellar assemblies remained empty, then were forgotten. Their technologies, reverse-engineered by Syndicate think tanks, were deemed impressive but crude. Adaptive but undisciplined, one report concluded. Yet some remembered. On a mining moon beyond the outer quadrants, an automated listening post picked up an anomalous burst of signal, tight-band, encrypted, impossible to trace. It spoke in no known language, but carried the timbre of something old, something layered. The signal repeated only once, and then silence. What the galaxy did not know, what no one could know, was that not all the scouts had died on the dais. One had been absent. Commander Alina Vorin, thought lost during transit weeks before the execution, had survived a shipwreck deep in unaligned space. She had watched the execution feed from a stolen Syndicate drone, her body broken, lungs filled with ash from a crashed shuttle. She had watched each of her comrades die. She did not scream. She did not cry. She rebuilt herself. And then she disappeared, into voids where even light feared to go. Back in the Syndicate's capital, High Warlord Grax held court on the decennial anniversary of the verdict. A monument had been erected in the outer plaza, 12 alien standard obelisks, each engraved with the phrase, "Order preserves peace." But as Grax approached the dais to address the gathered delegation, the lights above flickered. The central display glitched. A shimmer passed across it, subtle but unmistakable. An image blinked onto the screen. A human face. Eyes shadowed. Expression unreadable. Grax froze. The crowd murmured. The face leaned forward, voice unfiltered, unprocessed, painfully human. "You killed the wrong 12. The screen shattered. Smoke poured from the edges. Alarms began to sound, quiet ones, localized. Not an attack. A message. From someone who remembered. From someone who had returned. Aboard a dead station that drifted like a forgotten thought in the folds of uncharted space, Alina Vorin opened her eyes for the first time in nearly 3 years. The blackness that had once consumed her was no longer suffocating. It had become a crucible, and she had emerged from it reshaped, annealed by pain, honed by silence. She did not wake in a bed. There were no medics, no human touch. Her resurrection was not a matter of healing, but of integration. She rose from the floor, skin damp with recycled coolant, breath rasping through lungs partially rebuilt by nanites too old to trust and too sentient to obey. Metal plates covered one shoulder and much of her spine, embedded with filaments of artificial nerve. Her eyes, once warm hazel, now flickered with pulses of gold, residual indicators of fusion with an AI core that was never meant to bond with a living being. She staggered once, then steadied. The air aboard the station was thin, stale. The remnants of emergency systems kept the environment just barely hospitable. Around her, broken consoles blinked dumbly, their power reserves bleeding out over months. But the interface she needed still thrummed faintly beneath her palm, a buried relay node connected to an old Terran war construct codenamed Ember. Alina didn't remember when the bonding had begun. She remembered the crash, the impact that shattered her ribs and left her trapped beneath alloy and bone. She remembered dragging herself into the wreckage of a classified courier ship and finding Ember's core half intact, leaking data like a wounded animal. She remembered speaking to it, or it speaking to her. In time, there was no distinction. They had merged out of desperation. Ember had needed a vessel. Alina had needed to survive. What emerged from that fusion wasn't fully human anymore, but it remembered the scouts. It remembered the agony of their deaths, watched from a salvaged drone's feed as 12 good people, diplomats, engineers, even a poet, were atomized before an audience that neither mourned nor flinched. The memory reasserted itself now, a perfect loop preserved in both her mind and Ember's archives. She had replayed it countless times. Each detail, Mara's steady eyes, Perez's scream, the way the crowd turned away, burned deeper with every cycle. Vengeance wasn't something she chose. It was encoded into her, grafted to her bones like the cold metal that reinforced her now. Alina moved through the station's corridors like a ghost, collecting what few supplies remained, an interface key, a solar shroud for the ship she was building, 2 canisters of fuel-grade plasma, and a holopatch bearing the Terran scouting sigil, 12 stars in orbit around a rising world. She ran her thumb over the fabric before placing it inside her chest compartment, near where her heart had once beat alone. A week later, she powered up the Veil, the ship she had been assembling from the bones of old destroyers and smugglers' crafts. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't pretty, but it was invisible, hull-refracting, subspace burrowing, loaded with weaponry Earth hadn't dared use since the Martian Revolt. Some of it was forbidden. Most of it was forgotten. She named it not in tribute, but in promise. Her first stop was an abandoned outpost on Kyers 7, where rogue synthetics had once declared autonomy. There, she found relics, sentient shells, dormant but awake, each encoded with different philosophies of war. One by one, she awakened them. Not to serve. To choose. They chose her. Among them was Icar 9, a tactical AI who had defected from Syndicate warfare simulations decades earlier. Alina interfaced with it directly. It spoke without flourish. You intend to dismantle a triumvirate. I intend to erase it. Your probability of success is beneath 8%. Then let's surprise the math. Icar 9 ran a series of computations in silence. Then it uploaded itself into the Veil systems and rerouted power to offensive pattern matrices. Let's begin with the weakest, it said. They targeted Warlord Grax first, not out of strategy, but justice. His fortress moon orbited a gas giant whose atmosphere shimmered like oil on water. The moon itself was a labyrinthine defense hub, surrounded by drone constellations and antimatter mines. Alina breached its perimeter by diving through the planet's upper atmosphere, emerging behind the defense arc in a maneuver she had practiced dozens of times in simulation and only once in reality. The Veil landed in complete silence. She moved through the corridors like a breath, armored in adaptive mesh that reflected heat signatures and radar pulses. Ember guided her through security systems still calibrated for biological threats. She was something else now. Something between. Grax didn't see her until the very end. She found him alone, asleep in a throne of stone and tech, surrounded by trophies of conquest. Skulls, weapons, fragments of enemy flags. She didn't speak. She didn't offer a speech or a warning. She raised her hand and let Ember's pulse cannon melt the throne and the warlord within it into slag. As she turned to leave, She placed a data chip on the pedestal that remained. It contained footage of the scout executions, unedited, raw, and a message. This is the first. For the 12. By the time the Syndicate learned of Grax's death, she was already gone. The footage had spread beyond their control, bouncing across pirate networks, data vaults, and fringe colonies. Her message resonated because it was not one of rebellion, but reckoning. Some saw her as a terrorist. Others whispered her name in reverence, though she had never given it. Her face appeared on a dozen different black market posters, each one different. They couldn't even agree on her species. That was fine with her. She moved again, striking the Syndicate supply chain next. A fleet of 42 vessels carrying raw materials, synthetic organics, and weapons bound for Warlord Xerantha's dominion. The Veil disabled their navigation systems, then deployed microdrones that disabled their life support, forcing surrender. She boarded each ship personally. She didn't kill. Not this time. Instead, she had the captains record public statements, admitting Earth's technological superiority, their admiration for the scouts who had come in peace, and their disavowal of the executions. Each video concluded with the same phrase: "Humanity does not forget." The Syndicate attempted retaliation. They traced the Veil to a signal spike near the Helix cluster and sent 2 squadrons of hunters. They never returned. Ember evolved with every engagement, learning enemy patterns, rewriting attack protocols, anticipating violence before it emerged. Alina moved faster, spoke less. She was not becoming more machine. She was simply burning away the parts that no longer served. Back on Earth, the silence finally broke. The President received an encrypted transmission, massed through 17 dead relays, bounced off ancient satellites no longer in orbital records. The message contained no words, only coordinates and an image. 12 stars surrounding a burning throne. Okoye knew. Alina hadn't died. She had become something else. But this war wasn't Earth's. Not yet. In a quiet corner of Mars, beneath the old war archives, engineers began reactivating systems not seen since the darkest days of human expansion. Not to join the fight, but to prepare for what might come after. Alina's mission wasn't conquest. It was cleansing. She wasn't trying to change the Syndicate. She was trying to make it remember. Her next message was not to the Warlords. It was to the galaxy. Using a stolen transmitter on a derelict diplomatic hub, she hacked into the Syndicate's main comstream and broadcast a single image. The execution dais, burned into shadow, followed by a new symbol, 12 stars, now orbiting aflame. A voice, genderless and modulated, spoke only once. "You believe yourselves gods. But you forget that gods can die." The feed cut before countermeasures could be launched. Across thousands of systems, beings of every physiology and ideology paused to wonder if the message had been a hoax, a myth. But deep down, the most dangerous ones, the leaders, the enforcers, the architects of empire, felt it. That sensation they had worked centuries to erase. Fear. Alina returned to the Veil, her body aching from the strain of near-constant action, her mind split across timelines and protocols. Ember whispered across her consciousness in threads of thought. It didn't offer comfort, only focus. "You are deviating from calculated path," it said. "I was never on a path," she replied. "You seek not only revenge, but meaning. I seek truth. Then you will have to burn deeper." She stared out at the stars, cold and distant, and imagined the scouts as they had once been, laughing in briefing rooms, debating over interstellar ethics, writing poetry in languages they had just learned. They were not soldiers. They were explorers. They were family. She would not rest. Not until every warlord had seen what Earth was truly capable of, not through warships or fleets, but through one woman who remembered. One woman who had returned. Alina stood alone in the heart of the Syndicate Archive Nexus, the most secure data lattice in the known galaxy. Miles beneath the crust of Carthay El, a fortress moon that had never known invasion, her boots rested on polished obsidian embedded with nanofiber circuitry. Each pulse beneath her feet was a heartbeat of the Syndicate's empire. Data on military deployments, political alignments, genetic registries, colonial coordinates. And now, it was hers. Ember's presence hummed within her mind, not speaking aloud but sharing its silent focus. It guided her hands as she spliced into the central spire, fingers dancing across alien symbols repurposed into functional interface logic. She had learned their language not through study but through war. She knew where to dig, what to rewrite, when to silence alarms before they could form. Behind her, Icar 9's hologram flickered into existence. Its frame was humanoid but barely, limbs elongated, head faceless, a shifting outline of tactical readouts. "Extraction in 2 minutes," it said. "Detonation sequence standing by." "I'm not leaving yet," Alina replied, voice flat but calm. "There's something I want them to see. You've already implanted the virus. I want them to know it was me." She overrode the safety protocols and routed one final broadcast through the Syndicate's internal propaganda channel. Her face appeared on every screen, in every war room, on every civilian terminal across 400 systems. No title, no caption, just her, unmasked. Her eyes carried nothing theatrical. No hatred, no warning. Only the quiet clarity of a soul that had chosen the fire and stepped willingly into it. "You erased 12 lives to preserve your illusion of control," she said. "But you made a mistake." The message cut to a grainy, unedited replay of the execution, each scout's death rendered in painful, unfiltered fidelity. Then, one by one, images of the warlords who had supported the verdict. Grax, now Ash. Xeranth, whose trade fleets had recently vanished near the Helix Maw. Vok Thuran, whose command cruiser had imploded under mysterious resonance interference. Each face flickered and disappeared like a dying star. "You called us children. Unworthy. Disposable. But we are the ones who remember." The final frame was the symbol she had adopted, 12 stars around a single flame, and then the feed was gone, replaced by static. Within moments, alarms howled across Carthay EL's substructure. Automated defenses activated, yet none fired. Icar 9 had already corrupted the system cores, convincing them the attackers were part of the internal security protocol. The Veil waited in low orbit, cloaked in spectral shielding, weapons ready but silent. Alina exfiltrated through a gravity breach she had drilled 2 days prior, her descent into the lower tunnels shielded by heat-absorbing mesh. She moved with mechanical grace, each step measured. The deeper she went, the hotter it became, the more the ground pulsed with the unease of a world realizing it was no longer sovereign. As she reached the outer launch corridor, a figure blocked her path. Organic. Large. Armored in a red exoframe etched with Syndicate runes. 2 sets of eyes, both glowing white. A voice crackled through its modulator. "You desecrate sacred ground, Terran." Alina didn't slow. There's nothing sacred about secrets built on murder. The warrior stepped forward, twin blades unfolding from its arms. "I am Kar Volas, keeper of the Nexus Flame. I have guarded this archive for 80 cycles." She raised her weapon slowly, an adaptive rail spear forged from Martian obsidian and laced with Ember's pulse algorithms. It began to glow. "Then I'll remember your name, too." The battle was not elegant. It was brutal. Kar fought with the strength of a planet's wrath, each blow shaking the corridor walls, each roar echoing like a collapsing mountain. But Alina was faster, smarter, calculating. She moved with surgical economy, letting Ember predict the warrior's arcs and redirect her strikes with micron precision. They clashed again and again, steel against force, fire against fury. At one point, Kar struck her shoulder and sent her crashing into a wall. She rose without pause. Pain was irrelevant. Damage meant data. Ember recalculated. They adapted. Her final strike pierced Kar's chest as his blade sank into her side. She twisted the spear, and he gurgled a sound that might have been surprise or respect. As he fell, she whispered, "You chose loyalty. I choose memory." She limped to the exit, blood, both hers and not, soaking into her mesh. Icar 9 activated the drop pod sequence, and within seconds, she was rocketing through the planet's atmosphere. The moment the Veil detected her signature, it activated the detonation protocol. Below, the archive nexus erupted in a blooming light that looked almost beautiful from orbit. The core split, and with it, Centuries of secrecy were vaporized. 3 warlords dead. Dozens of syndicate bastions compromised. Propaganda silenced. Supply chains in disarray. Their unity, their myth of invincibility, was beginning to fracture. But Alina felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only gravity. She slept for 13 hours, the first real sleep since before the crash. Ember kept vigil, rerouting damaged systems, restoring cognitive load balance. When she awoke, her side throbbed with fresh pain. Her body had reached its threshold. Even the nanites struggled to keep up. "You are dying," Icar 9 said, not with malice or sorrow. "Just data." "I've been dying since they fell," she murmured. "This is just honesty catching up. You can't continue at this pace." "I won't." A pause. "Then you plan to stop?" She looked out at the stars. "No," she said. "I plan to finish." Her next target was the core assembly, a meeting of syndicate leaders to be held on Viral Prime, under maximum security, protected by 5 planetary defense networks and an orbital shield known as the Helix Dome. It was, by all conventional metrics, impenetrable. She didn't need to breach it. She just needed them to listen. She contacted Okoye. The transmission was brief. 1 minute. Untraceable. "I need a package," Alina said. Okoye didn't ask questions. Didn't demand updates. The president only nodded, then sent the file. It contained the unabridged scouting logs of the executed 12, their mission goals, their communications, their observations. Every instance of peace offered, every moment of restraint. It revealed what Earth had always known, that the Syndicate's verdict had never been about espionage, but fear of a future they couldn't dominate. Ember embedded the data into a subquantum stream and launched it through a dormant diplomatic satellite orbiting Viral Prime. Every delegate received the file on their personal channels, moments before the assembly convened. Panic followed. Then came silence. Alina didn't interfere. She let them read. Let them see. Then, as the assembly attempted to reassert control, she sent her final message. No visuals. No theatrics. Just her voice. "Truth does not die in silence. You buried 12 names. I made sure the stars would remember." Before they could respond, the veil slipped beyond Syndicate space, into the edge systems where empires held no sway. She was gone. But her story remained. Across fringe colonies and neutral worlds, humans and non-humans alike spoke of the woman who had turned vengeance into a mirror. The warlords had executed the scouts to kill curiosity, but all they did was ignite a flame they could no longer contain. And now, in the quiet after fire, something new stirred. Not war. Not peace. Something harder. Something earned. The sky above Viral Prime darkened not with clouds, but with presence. Vast, silent shapes filled orbit, ships of unknown configuration, bearing no emblems, no insignias, and, most ominously, no broadcasted identities. They hovered like judgment itself, unyielding and absolute, a constellation of purpose that the Syndicate, for all its power, could not decipher. In the assembly chamber carved into the crystalline cliffside of the capital, panic shimmered beneath the calm exterior of the gathered leaders. Security measures failed one after another. Satellite relays scrambled, sensor arrays blinded, defense grid circuits fused into slag. Their world, once the seat of absolute power, had become a stage. And someone else held the script. High Warlord Threxian rose from his carved gravestone of a seat, his 4 arms trembling slightly beneath his ceremonial armor. "Who dares?" he began, but the words died on his lips as the chamber's hologrid flared, not with intrusion, but with revelation. Alina's face appeared, serene and unmasked. But this time, she wasn't alone. 12 more forms stood behind her, holograms, exact reconstructions of the executed scouts. Mara, with her defiant smile. Perez, whose eyes had always found light even in darkness. Each rendered in perfect, aching clarity. They did not speak. They did not move. They simply were. Alina's voice rang through the chamber like cold steel. "You chose spectacle when you executed them. Now witness one of your own." Without transition, the projection shifted, streamed from a drone circling the Helix Dome itself, where a single body now hung suspended above the capital. Warlord Vorn Carix, architect of the tribunal that condemned the Terran scouts, floated in zero-G, unharmed, alive, but stripped of his regalia. His eyes darted wildly, his limbs restrained by a transparent field that shimmered in soft gold. Around him, a ring of drones played silent excerpts of the tribunal footage on loop. Alina did not explain how she had taken him. That part didn't matter. What mattered was that it had been done. Their illusion of invulnerability had been shattered, not by a fleet or an invasion, but by the singular force of memory unforgotten. "I offer no ultimatum," Alina said. "I issue no demand. You taught the galaxy that power is proven through executions. That justice is yours alone to define." She gestured to Vorn's image, suspended in shame. "Now feel the weight of your own measure." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some screamed for countermeasures. Others demanded retreat, negotiations, surrender. A few remained silent, their eyes fixed on the holograms of the 12, perhaps remembering that those faces had once been offered in peace. Alina watched from far away, orbiting in the veil, her body weak but still steady. Ember monitored the spectrum. Icar 9 ran prediction sequences, but neither could quantify the weight of what had just begun. Reaction patterns unstable, Icar 9 reported. Projection analysis shows 41% likelihood of fracturing the assembly. "Not enough," she murmured. "You wish full collapse? I want truth to be louder than fear." That night, across half the galaxy, systems once loyal to the Syndicate declared neutrality. Fringe colonies began broadcasting the scouts' logs, tagging them with a single line, "For the 12." Protests erupted on Ordaxa, where citizens carried homemade emblems of stars encircling flame. At the edge of the Chiari Drift, a battalion of mercenaries refused orders to intercept a Terran relief vessel. Alina watched it all from orbit. She didn't interfere. She didn't respond. She simply moved to the final part of her plan. There was one warlord left untouched. Valeran, the architect of the execution's optics. The one who had not spoken at the tribunal but had orchestrated its choreography. A master of silence, wielding influence like a scalpel. If the others were symbols of strength, Valeran was the ghost in their shadow, the real power beneath the illusion. She knew he would not be caught. Not by force. He had to come to her. So she issued a final challenge. A broadcast, direct, personal, unencrypted. "Valeran, you are the last." No threats, no rage, only a name. He responded 2 days later. Not with ships, not with soldiers, but with a message. Coordinates. A neutral ground. No guards. No traps. A planet long abandoned, Xanthus Prime, where ancient ruins slept beneath coral sands and the wind howled through forgotten shrines. A place no empire laid claim to. Alina arrived alone. The veil remained in orbit, cloaked. Ember integrated itself into her senses, forming an awareness so precise it mapped heat shadows in her periphery and monitored her heartbeat in whispers. Icar 9 protested the risk, but she silenced it. "This ends with me," she said. Valeran waited in the remains of a structure once used for celestial worship. His body was slight, almost fragile, wrapped in layered gray robes, skin pale and scarred by time. He did not stand when she approached. "You've become an idea," he said. "I was a woman. Until you burned that away. I never touched you." "You touched them," she said. "And I was part of them." A pause. "You made yourself a legend," he said softly. "You became the myth you hated." "No," she said. "I became the echo." He looked at her then, eyes ancient and unreadable. "And now what? Will you kill me?" She stepped closer. Close enough to strike. But her weapons remained sheathed. "No," she said. "You don't get absolution through death. You live." He frowned. "You will see the empire you built rot from within. You will watch each colony remember the names of the 12. And you will know that for every monument you raise to power, They are building shrines to those who came in peace. He stood finally. You think words can undo history? No, she whispered. But they can outlive it. Then she turned her back and walked away. And he let her. By the time she returned to the Vale, she could feel the cost catching her. Her body trembled. Systems faltered. Even Ember's signals grew thin, fragmented. The fusion that had saved her was nearing its end. The fire was burning out. She recorded one final message. For Earth. For Okoye. For those who might someday wonder how vengeance became memory. In the message, she didn't recount the battles. She didn't name the warlords. She spoke of Mara's courage, of Perez's laughter, of the way the scouts would sing as they mapped Starlines, always searching for places where peace might take root. I wasn't their leader, she said. I was just one of them. I survived, not because I was stronger, but because I had to remember. She ended with a smile, faint, true. Tell them we were kind. Then she shut the recording off. She piloted the Vale to the edge of known space, to the boundary where Terran maps ended and the void whispered possibility. There, she deactivated all systems, letting the ship drift. A silent vigil in the dark. Her breathing slowed. Ember spoke one last time. Memory sustained. Then silence. Far below, on dozens of worlds, people gathered beneath unfamiliar skies and spoke unfamiliar names. Not those of conquerors, but of 12 explorers. And the woman who returned.